Okay, so now we're up to chapter 35, and we're going to find out what the word Israel means. V'hine bechinas Yisrael, Israel. What does that mean? It's constituted of two words. Sar Kel means the Sir of God, which means like the night of God. Dahainu, and so how does a person become a knight of God? Um, if they're functioning like they should, right? Tainu alidei haras hakeser, through the light of the crown, b'chachma, in insight, shenikra kel, which that is kel. Which, so what is the word of name of God? Which is, it's actually pronounced. We don't say God's name for no unless it's inside prayer. So I'm gonna call it kel, but really it's spelled with it's said with an e, and then l. So what is that? That is God's crown, how it's shining in insight. Nihiru de chachmasa, it's the light of insight. Shakesahu am mishterer, it's kesa that rules. It's kesa, which is the source of the light. So what happens is a person has their insight, their drive, their pleasure, and their insight is totally aligned and inspires their emotions. That all the emotions are in total alignment, even if a person has a gut reaction to something, the person's still going to behave totally aligned. Is explained in another place, Binyan Kisarisa, regarding the whole idea of Yaakov wrestling with the angel of Esav, and Sarisa means he was victorious. He was successful in the wrestling, and of course it was a spiritual wrestling. So now, according to what we've said now we can understand Inyan Yichud Yisrael V'Leah. The idea of unifying Yisrael V'Leah, Shehu Yichud Hamidis B'Machshava. So what is Leah? Leah is the embodiment. So if Israel is the embodiment of God's crown, the way it inspires insight, Leah is thought. So Yisrael is these inspired emotions, and Leah is thought, the thought of God. She embodies the thought of God. Shenikra Leah, v'yichud Yaakov v'Rachel, and also a different mode that could be happening. And these modes, they reverberate throughout creation. So this is Yaakov and Rachel. Yaakov is the emotions, but the way they are without complete, every every second connection with insight. Rachel is God speaking. She embodies God speaking, creating the world. In other words, Yaakov has two names. In other words, he has two modes, Yaakov mode and Yisrael mode, and he had two wives. And these two wives, they embody different aspects of God. Leah embodies God's thought, and Rachel embodies God speaking. She yichud amides bedibur, and when the two combine, when Yaakov and Rachel combine in that mode, this is the embodiment of God's emotions being totally united with God's words. In other words, the words bring out God's emotions. So these are different modes that the world is in and goes in and out from. Before we understand these different modes, let's understand the Hefresh ben Yisrael Yaakov. What is the difference between Yisrael mode and Yaakov mode? In the Bechinas Yaakov, Bechinas Tiferes. Yaakov is the embodiment of the central emotion of Tiferes, of beauty, the Zah, of the small faces of Atzilus. Shu Bechinas Shuhu Midas Harachem, which that is the emotion, Tiferes, beauty, balance. It's also the emotion of compassion. Yedua, like it's known, Sha'avis Hein Hamarkava, because the forefathers, they were a chariot for God. And when Yaakov embodies Tiferes, he's a chariot for the emotion of compassion. Abraham, the first Jew, was a chariot of kindness, the Zohar of God's personality of called small faces of Atzilus. Yitzchak, bebechinas gvura, and Yitzchak was the embodiment of God's focus and strength and mightiness. Yaakov bechinas tiferes, and Yaakov, his theme that he was embodied God's compassion, God's beauty, God's balance. And it's actually balance is the emotion of truth. It has everything inside it. It actually says in a verse, Titin emes Yaakov, give the truth to Yaakov. Chesed Avram, kindness to Abraham. The verse tells us what their themes are. Visa b'Zayar al pasuk, and it's written in the Zayar on the pasuk, v'nasati li eis emes, give me a true letter, da eis vav. This is the letter of vav, meaning to say, when Yehoshua sent spies to Israel to check out the land, he sent 2 spies, and they stayed in the house of Rachav, and they got the psychological, emotional state of the people of Yericho from her, and they promised to save her when the city is surrounded. And she says, well, how are you going to know what my house is? So give me Ais Emes, one true sign that you're going to know what my house is. And there was a rope. She actually worked as a prostitute, and now she decided that she wants to become Jewish. She wants to join the Jewish people. And there was a rope which her customers used to climb on the outside of the city. They had a red rope, and they used to climb up this red rope, and to be her customers, in order that they shouldn't be embarrassed that they're coming past her door. And she decided she's going to use this same rope to let the Jewish people know where her house is, so her family will be saved. And she wanted to use specifically that which she now deemed inappropriate, and to use it to show that she wants to totally change her life around. But there was also something else that happened. She was extremely spiritual and had a tremendous spiritual potential. And she said, I'm not Jewish, but I want to get the Jewish soul. And she knew that people that convert to Judaism, they could get from the wings of the divine presence, which the wings are on the sides. Their theme could be more kindness, would be like the right wing, or their theme could be more strictness, which is the left wing. But she said, I want to get a soul from the middle, like Yaakov Avinu. I want to get a soul of balance. I don't want to be just like the wings of the Shekhinah. I want to get a soul like everybody else from the center. And that is the idea of a Vav, because the rope represents also the letter of Vav, which is a straight letter, which represents the idea of compassion and tiferes. So that's Titan Li Ais Emes, give me a true sign. Da Ais Vav, the Zohar says the spiritual meaning behind that is she wanted to get from the Vav of the name of God, her soul that she's going to get as a gift now by joining the Jewish people should come from the Vav, because God's name has 4 letters. She wants to get it specifically from the 3rd letter, which is Vav. Bechinas, and for what merit?
The sixth letter? Why the third letter?
It was the third letter of Yud Kei Vav. Okay.
Oh, okay.
From God's name, I want to get from the third letter of God's name, I want to get a soul from there. On the merit, she said, what merit do I have? Because I saved your life.
Mm-hmm.
In the merit of saving 2 Jews' lives, I want to be able to get a Jewish soul from the center when I convert to Judaism. And she did that, and she married Yeshua, who was the leader of the Jewish people at the time, and had grandchildren that were prophets. Yaakov, so she wanted to get her soul from Jacob, which is the middle path. It's like the middle, in the construction of the tabernacle in the desert, you had different poles that went through the beams. The center beam miraculously was bent at the corners, and it was a center beam. So that's what she wants. She wants from the center beam. And this is the same idea as Jacob. Vanyan Yedua, and it's known, the idea behind this, it's known, the Kava Yamin Achan, because in the Kabbalistic, when we write down the way the 10 spheres are set up in the Tikkun way, they're set up like in the shape of a human. So on the right side, you have Chachan, which is Chochma, Chesed, and Netzach, which means Chochma, insight, from the right brain, Chesed, kindness, on the right hand, and Netzach, the right thigh. That's the right beam. Harikava smell, Baga, and the left beam in a human is a left brain, Bina, which is comprehension, Gvura, which is the left arm, and Hoid is majesty or heroism or beauty from the left side, from being a hero. That's Baga on the left side. And Soisrei, and there's a Soisrei means that there is it's like minus and plus. They conflict. They can conflict. One can cancel out the other. The emotion of judgment can cancel out the emotion of kindness. And actually limit the light of kindness. And the opposite, kindness will limit judgment. So there's a conflict between them. Nimsa Shneim, Nifsakim, and it turns out as they conflict each other, both of them have limits. And they don't, it's not truth. Truth is the same in the beginning, middle, and end. Truth is consistent and continues on and is enduring. And these two paths are not enduring alone. Ki ikar emes huma. Can you move the screen up so I can? Thank you. Thank you. Change the ikar emes, because the main thing of truth, huma sheyesh l'kiyum, is something that is going to continue existing. For example, the lips of truth will be set up forever. Va'ad, and forever, aragia, for the moment, is not truth. So void, forever, is something that's is truth. It stays. Because lies is kaizev, is dishonest. What does kaizev mean? The water will not endure. Shanar shenifsak, because if you have a river that sometimes doesn't flow because the water it's not being fed, if it doesn't flow once in 7 years, so it's not a true river. A true river will never stop. For Amnam midas emes hu amiskayim midas emes hu amiskayim liyese kolu mebeis afkim. The truth will actually endure. That's miskayim liyese, being that it's kolu. It has in itself a synergy of two opposites. The chesed is a synergy of kindness and strictness. And there's nothing going to hold them back. There's nothing opposite. There's nothing that's going to hold it back and go against this middle path. Klal at all. Okay, therefore the water of the middle path is never going to stop. And this is what it means. Eis emes, a true letter. Why? Da vav is a vav. Why? Because the vav is like a line covered inside. This represents the middle path. Which includes in it kindness and strictness. Who das tiferes yisoid, and that middle path is das, which is the brain of focus, which is the back brain, and also behind the forehead. Tiferes, which is the body, the trunk, and yisoid is the connective organ of both men and women. Because of Lamaila Ba'is Chav, like we've already explained before in chapter 21. There's also another advantage in the middle path, which is the middle path. Das Tiferes Yisoid. In the brain, it's the middle of the brain, the back of the brain, and the behind the forehead is Das, is the brain of focus. Tiferes is the body, which is beautiful. It has a balance of all things. Yisoid is the is housed in the apparatus of connection. There is no break from beginning to end. Like when you you don't have a clean path from the right brain to the right hand to the right foot, but you do have a clean path from the center brain down the spinal cord to the body, all the way to the connective organ. Just like you have connection nerves, like in the head, it connects all the way to the bottom of the middle path. And it's not the path of energy does not become alternate, does not become changed because it's being brought down. And this is the reason. That's because there's a direct connection from the head to the end, to the head of the tail of the human. Can we put the yachad together? They are just like one thing. Just like the middle beam that connected all that connected the panels in the Mishkan in the desert, the sanctuary in the desert. It basically passes through one end to the other end of all the panels, even turns corners miraculously. From the head to the from the highest beam to the lowest beam. You mean the smell? This is not what happens with the path of the right or the left. There's no direct connection. Therefore, therefore, at the end is not the same as the beginning. The right thigh doesn't have a direct connection through the right side to the brain or the right hand. in chesed, in chachma chesed netzach, insight, kindness, and victory. Hari netzach yigra ashefa. By the time the energy from insight goes down to victory, it's already the energy of the insight has actually weakened. And similarly on the other side, by the time it goes to the left thigh, which is the idea of being a hero, right? It's already the heroism has sort of disconnected from the original logic. Like it's known like it's known in these two opposite emotions when dealing with the world. These are like the emotions that deal with the world: winning or hoid or holding back, yes or no. Shnekar train Bade Arava, they're actually represented by the two um, leaves from the Arava tree, which is a willow tree. That there's a commandment to shake these four different plants together on Sukkot, to represent unity from different things. And in fact, there's actually two willow branches that we shake together with the palm branch. And so both of those willows represent Netzach and Hoid, victory, and yet the yes and no. And the willow is unlike the other species. She'ein beitam verech. It doesn't have a taste and it doesn't have a smell. That, you know why? You know why? Because by the time a human decides to be victorious or heroic, it doesn't really have the reasoning anymore. The original reasoning gets lost. Because kindness is only just a branch of insight. Because the intellect and the decision making strategy to move towards Shabbat to kindness, Kvar Chalaf, it sort of disappears. Once you decided to already do the kindness, it disappears, the reasoning. Varvar, Ikrare, and the main thing which was inspiring it is sort of disappeared, and the kindness already has a life of its own. Only a little tiny hidden amount of the original reasoning is actually inspiring the kindness. However, it does have in a deep way. Is it possible to move the screen up? Thank you. However, the trigger, the intellectual trigger for the kindness is sort of disconnected from it, and there's no direct connection so much because kindness is like the right hand, the power of the hand, yamin of the shenifsak min it already has a life of its own. It's sort of separated from the reasoning, from the brain, and you actually see that physically. And in the emotion of winning, shu nitzuach haheskem levad. It's basically the decision to win. For nifsak min the chachma, it already has separated itself from the insight and the wisdom that generated it in the first place. Yesha ki loy nishar berak reshem ba'alma, only a little bit of remnants of the original intellect, of the original love that inspired it, the chesed and the kindness. It's like the right thigh. It's separated from the kindness in the strength of the right hand. There's no direct connection between the hand and the thigh. It's a chulu. The same thing, the left hand, smell in the left thigh, shem bechinas kava smell, which is the left part of the left path, baga, which is called bina, comprehension, gvura, strictness, hide, heroism, mufsakim zemizeh. Each one of them has there's a gap. between them. Therefore, when you get to the end, you don't have from the beginning, because um, the reasoning is disconnected until you can totally lose it. I'll give you an example. God creates a drive for the purpose of God wants more souls in the world. He wants these souls to do and achieve things in the world. So he creates a drive that um, that people should, when they see physical hints of the possibility of future pregnancy, a man, when he sees the hint of somebody of childbearing age, the hint of uh, uh, a possible pregnancy, like the wider hips, or the ability to the hint to be able to in the future feed the baby, whatever these physical hints are, um, and that creates a hormonal response that makes a person want to like win and go for it, and 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 um, and take the actions necessary to be able to bring a soul into the world. But the problem is the reasoning gets muddled, because the same emotions can be triggered by seeing pixels, and which will never bring to the actual intent that God had in creating this apparatus in the first place. So you see that there is a trigger, there is a logic behind it, but it sort of can be like you can lose the intent of creating this totally, and can totally not achieve the original goal. It's totally disconnected from the reasoning. And Vitaka Kaf Yerech Yaakov, and that's why on the subject of on this specific subject, it says that the thigh of Yaakov was able to be damaged by the angel, meaning to say that the children of Yaakov, they could have this damage where a person's drives will not be aligned with the proper intent of why they were created in the first place, and not achieve what they're supposed to do, is bring more children into the world in an honorable way, where the child will feel, hey, I came into I came into this world honorably, right? And they could be in this. The thigh represents that drive. Shinaga Netzach was actually, the angel was able to damage his right thigh, which is the idea of winning. Begir Anasha, in the Gir Anasha, it's a special vein which we're not allowed to eat, as a commemoration of, and to remind us about this, that we are vulnerable in the thigh, in a spiritual level. And the klippas, bad energy, can get energy from that, because it's being wasted on something on something that's just a fantasy that doesn't really exist in the real world. And the Zohar also speaks about the idea of the thigh of the woman that uh, that was willing to be by herself with a man which is not her husband. I mean, what led her to do something so destructive that will make her husband suspect her, and destabilize the emotions of the marriage, and also destabilize the emotions of the kids through such irresponsible behavior, hurtful behavior. So this is the Yerach Saita. This is the idea of the thigh. The thigh can go in the wrong direction. You can forget the original reasoning of why this drive exists in the first place. V'hainu atam, and for this reason, gamkein, for this reason as well, bechesed v'gvura atzman, kindness and strictness themselves can go the way. B'mashikosov, it's written, Abraham yatamenu Ishmael, Abraham, he had a son who wasn't so great. Well, whatever, he had bad behavior. It was Ishmael. Shehu Maisrei Pselas HaChasadim. He actually had the theme of kindness of Abraham. However, they went the wrong way, like in on the kindness which is not so beneficial. The idea of showing off. V'Yitzchak, now Yitzchak Yatzam Mimenu Esav, and Yitzchak was he was the Merkava, the of the divine strictness, Yatzam Mimenu Esav, but that caused it also went the wrong direction because he had a son called Esav, who was the Roman, right? From him came the Romans. And what happened? Yitzchak is the idea of strictness. So the Romans, the Esav, is Meishrim Apsulas Hagvura. They're basically strength, but going the wrong way. They create a big empire, but they can go wrong. They can lose their sense of morality. So great, you build an empire, and they're all about fighting wars, constant wars, but they can lose their sense of morality. Now just let's go back on this. Let's be really clear that Abraham was kind, and it actually Yishmael deep in his heart is also kind, but the kindness went the wrong way. But when Yitzchak, who was strict, actually brought Yishmael the right direction. In other words, the way to deal with the children of Yishmael is you need to be strict with them because they see kindness as weakness. Because they see kindness as weakness, and therefore you cannot be kind to them. It's going to get them the wrong direction. They're going to go in the wrong direction. And that's what Avram did to his son. Because of being around Avram, his father, Yishmael went the wrong direction. And when Avram passed away and he had to do with Yitzchak, then Yitzchak was strict, and Yishmael respected that. He respected strength, and he went the right direction. And he did tshuva towards the end of his life. And however, Yitzchak being strict didn't work for his American son. I mean, though I guess a lot of Americans come from the Romans, and it didn't work for him because deep down, Esav is a warrior. He's a fighter, but he doesn't like the fact that he's so strict, and he prefers to be treated with kindness. And he reacts well to kindness. He doesn't react well to strictness like Yishmael. Yishmael reacts very well to strictness. He sees strictness as strength. But if you treat an American with strictness, he's not going to react well to that because he's gonna go to war, and then he's going to feel guilty that he went to war. So as long as his grandfather was alive, he didn't work out well with his father, who was strict. But as long as his grandfather was alive, Abram, Esav didn't do anything wrong, because that kindness that he received from his grandfather was bad for Yishmael, but that was good for Esav. It's good to treat Americans with kindness. They will react well. And you'll see by their music as well. You see, because people like the opposite. So Yishmael, which deep down in his heart is kind, and that's why they like to build things that will show off, right? But the type of music that they choose is going to be of a minor chords, which is from the side of like Gvura, strictness, because they like that taste. And the Americans, which in their hearts are strength, like the Romans, right? So they're gonna like happy music. They're gonna choose happy music because that's people like the opposite. So you can listen to people's music and you'll figure out how they want to be treated. So Esav was the Meisrim of Psulas Agvura. He was the strictness. So strictness in the right direction. When Avram was inspiring Esav, so his strictness was being used on the right things. Be a good person. But when Avram passed away, and it was just his father being strict, so his strictness went to bad things, and he just went to um, make wars because he makes wars because that's what he does. Doesn't know what to do. It doesn't know what to do anything else. Builds empires and builds wars, makes wars. Aval Yaakov, however, the Yaakov, Shubachinas Kevem he's the middle path. He's the middle path, Das Tiferes Yisoid, which represents the idea of the right focus of the mind, a balance, a beautiful balance of emotions, and Yisoid, and a proper attachment, good relationships. Hariyesh bekav zeh chibur v'kesher meresher l'seifer. In this path, there's a connection from the head to the end. In other words, the connection to others is done intelligently. I mean, when Asaph is left to his own, the relationships are not good. They're not intelligent, right? Abusive, right? But when it's an intelligent, when we take on the Yaakov's way of relationships, the attachment is in is based on intelligence. Until you find that the behavior towards others is congruent with the intelligence, a master of emotional intelligence. And he's giving an example, like it's known, Kishoy Ella Das. An erection only happens when a person has a certain focus of the mind. Shabarosh, because it's the mind, Harikishur Bechinas Yisaid. It's the mind, it's the right, it's the exact focus of the mind is connected to the apparatus of connection bedas shabaneach through the focus of the mind, haresh of the brain, kilu hein mechus echas, and it's like as if it's like one thing. The apparatus of connection is one with the mind. It happens immediately. Shari adas hu pnimius hameir umekusher brachim shabalev. Das, proper focus, is the inner power that shines and is connected with the compassion of the heart. And they are always one. A person has to have compassion. A person has to have intelligence to understand a person's situation, what they are and what they could be. In other words, a wide intelligence. Like it says in the Zohar, Moshe Malagav, Moshe is on the inside, Yaakov Milavar, and Jacob is on the outside. Moses, our teacher, represents intelligence, the right focus. Das. We've learned about this before in like chapter 1 or 2, 1, I think, at the end. Moshe is on the inside, and then Jacob, the compassion comes out. If you have the right mental strategy, then you're going to be a compassionate person. V'hu b'chinas hadas, which this is das. This is the opposite of what they're speaking about nowadays about mass formation psychosis. Mass formation psychosis is when people don't accurately read the reality of the world around them, and they believe something else that is not really real to be true, and that starts with fear and not a proper evaluation of the actual danger and the risk. So it's a fear. It's already from the left side. But if you have das, if you have a proper focus on a proper evaluation of the actual risk, then the emotional response is not psychosis. It is an appropriate response according to the measure of risk. So the mental focus is the internal aspect of emotions, shel harachmim, of compassion. According to a person's mental capacity to focus on the greater picture, that is the amount, exactly how much compassion they're going to have. And a person who doesn't have a mental wide focus, wachzari, is cruel. Katinuk, like all children, don't really have a natural capacity for compassion and empathy. They have to be taught. They have to be told. Like, imagine if it was you that felt that's feeling what this child is feeling. How would you behave? It needs to be taught. It's not a natural emotion by a child because they don't have the mental focus. The kahai gavna. And similarly, it says, "V'yosef das, Yosef yargish rachamanos." A person who's going to exercise mental focus is going to exercise the feeling of compassion. So exercise the mind, you're going to have rachmanis, you're going to have compassion. The same thing with all relationships. It's in the mind. If you improve your maturity and widen your mind, you're going to have better relationship. Like it's written, another place by Arichas at length. Shein bein das v'rachmim shum hefsek. There is actually no boundary between mental focus and compassion. It's not like you have insight and insight. You know, the guy is generally a good guy. That's insight. We just look at the point. The guy is generally a good guy, and therefore I need to be kind to him. There is a step. There is a bump. There is a step between insight and decision for kindness. That's not the case with compassion. You focus on the bigger picture, and immediately compassion is there. That's a human trait. And we're speaking about what makes people humans. And some people are saying that humans are hackable. But what really makes a person human is their ability to have compassion. And the way they're going to have compassion is by the use of their brain. To be able to have a wider focus, to look at a person's state now and the person's state in the future, child's focus, the situation now, where they could be in the future, to see their potential. That is what makes a person human, because their intellectual, that strategy is immediately followed by compassion. No AI can do that. AI doesn't have compassion. It's a machine. What makes a person human is through their mental strategy of the right focus, of looking at the wider system, immediately a person will feel compassion. That is one of the core things of what makes, if not the most core ideas of what makes a person a human. the potential for compassion on others. And how much more so, there's a direct connection between mental focus and delivery through the organ of connection. Shuhu bechinas hiskashrus hamashpia al makabel. This is the idea of an attachment from the deliverer to the giver, el makabel to the receiver, in the connection that makes a baby. Shubba b'mehiras minadas, it actually can be delivered rapidly. Like it's known that men, their delivery from arousal till delivery is it can be very fast. It actually takes work to hold back, because naturally the delivery will be very quick. And also it's known, it says in the Bible at the beginning, man knew his wife and they had a baby. Why does the Bible choose to say a man knew his wife? Because that's really what's going on. That is the essence of what's going on. There's a mental connection, which actually, the physical connection flows and is only made possible through the mental focus. So the Chumash, the Bible, chooses to use the word which is most appropriate on the mechanism of the core of the relationship. And by the way, when we speak about the emotions which are for the outside world, which is winning or heroism, being a hero means, like, even if you're not going to win, still going to do it, right? Netzach, which is the winning, which is yes. Hoid means no, and Yesod means attachment. There's really internal um, ways of expressing these emotions, bepnimius, chen klos yetzes, and these are the idea of the internal uh, kidneys, the kidneys which give advice, which is hormones in the kidneys, and they affect a person's decision to go for it. Now is go time. Netzach is go time. That ability to go time is now, that's from the kidneys. AI can't do this, by the way. It can mimic this, but this is much greater. What we have is an amazing divine system where the kloyas, the kidneys, are going to define go time. Opnimis yesod shuma de gufa. So there's Yesod is the pipe of of speech, allows for attachment with other people by speaking and sharing ideas. But the most inner aspect of Yesod is the end of the body, which is the pipe of attachment, physical attachment, which brings babies. But now the external aspects of Netzach and Yesod, which means going for it or being a hero, even if it means I'm going to lose, which is Hoid, right? Those are represented by the two thighs. Commercial cost of Zohar, like it says in the Holy Zohar, Bereshis, in Bereshis, the Genesis, Binyan Yekavu Amayim, in regarding the idea of when the waters were gathered, God said, and He gathered all the waters together in one place. El Mokem Echad Shubachinas Yisod. That is that part of the Bible is actually describing a divine process of Yisod, of attachment. How does Yisod function? How does the mechanism, the apparatus of Yesod function? Shemiskabet sham kol hashefa nikra. What's that next word? I'm just the screen is blocking. Kenishu dechol naharin. So, gathering all the waters together means it's just explaining how your site functions, that all the waters come together, and it's considered Kenishu kol naharim. All the rivers will gather together, and that's what happens in a man's body, that the liquid around the brain travels down the subdural fluid, and somehow it gets to the it gets to um, to inside the scrotum, and then it becomes the seed. And this is that same idea as the middle stick that goes from one end to the other of the tabernacle of the desert. Okay, nikra emes, and that's why this is called truth. Shen osius aleph mem tes, because emes, truth, is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Taf is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Mem is the middle letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Resh Techseif, which is the head, the inner, and the end. Shala osius, of all the letters. It's consistency. The way it is in the beginning, that's the way it's in the end. That's the real idea of truth. That is being consistent. And that's why it's said about Yaakov Lameis, Yaakov never really died, because he can't die. Because since he embodies truth, truth can't die. There's many explanations on this. One of them is that that as long as his children are alive, so his legacy continues and he's alive. Another thing is also physically, he's in a sleeping state. His body didn't really die. Because death cannot grab onto him. Which is death, is the root of the peels, which means the dark energies. Inside, the dark energies cannot hold on to the middle path at all. For this reason, because it's true and it's consistent. And that's why it says the angel told Yaakov, you have now you fought, you had a night duel with Elohim, with angels, which really those angels, that angel of Asaph was actually a representative of Ban, of God's name, the way in the feminine, in the animalistic, and you won, because since you're the middle path, you're able to redirect dark energy for good. And this all comes from proper attention, and proper insight. Barosh, in the head, the Israeli Rosh, because Israel means also another way. The letters of Israel is Li Rosh. I have a head. I have a head. You need to be intelligent. You need to connect with the Torah, and when the head is right, then everything's going to follow correctly. Dafka, specifically when you have a head. Canal, like we've mentioned above. And that's why the angel told him, now your name is different. You're going to have a name called Yisrael. Mashiach and Yaakov, however, when he's in Yaakov mode means that the emotions are not directly connected, but because he has these external emotions of netzach and hod, of winning and heroism, Tren Yerchim, which are the two thighs, that's where Yaakov can go wrong. Shabayim, can we go? Can you live? Is it possible to lift it up? Shabayim mikaycha shel chesed v'gvura, that these two emotions, external emotions of winning and heroism, come from strictness, kindness and strictness, the Avram Yitzchak of Abraham, and which we inherited from Abraham and Isaac. But those ones can go wrong. That's why the angel was able to damage the spoon of his right thigh, benetzach. He was able to damage his victory, his gut reactions, the kav yamin of the right side, the right line, mitamanal, from the reasoning above. Mashenken Beisrael, however, this is not the case when he's in the mode of Israel mode. In other words, total alignment with the intellect. Nemar v'legam netzach Yisrael le'yishak. It says that even the netzach, the winning of Israel, will not lie. In other words, that even the winning, even the gut reactions, will be in total alignment with the inside. Because Israel is on the level when he's activated the inner aspects of the emotions, the chesed gvura of kindness and strictness, which the inner power of them is at the das, is actually the middle power of das, of middle power of focus. So he's able to decide when appropriate kindness is due and when appropriate strictness is due, because it's all aligned without any breaks. Shnemar by Kisarisa, it says the reason I'm going to give you Israel is because you fought and won. And also this is what's written, that the fact that it's written regarding Yaakov that he didn't die, because it's actually written, they will die but not with insight. In other words, with lack of insight, people die. And also this, what the rabbis say, Yaakov Mishamesh B'marim, Yaakov continues to serve God above, Chachma Ubina, because he has alignment with insight and comprehension. He got there because his focus is wide enough to be able to handle both insight and comprehension at the same time. So therefore, his service continues on and without a stop. And the brain is higher than the chest. Behind Mitzad Sherish Yaakov Lamaila, and that is because of the source of Jacob. Lamaila, the source of Jacob is very high in spirituality. Jacob comes from the center line, the Das Tiferes side of God's focus, God's beauty, God's attachment, metamanal, from the reasoning we've given before, how he was the grandson. He took both his father's and grandfather's traits and put them together. However, when you're just looking at the external aspects of Yaakov, the angel was able to cause damage to his gut reactions, and we also need to be careful of our reproductive drives. It could go the wrong direction if we don't pay attention, and we have to just be aware of that. And say something really interesting. There's a whenever new Hasidus gets printed, it's a revelation of divinity. So recently, a handwritten copy of Hasidus for the Alter Rebbe and the Mittel Rebbe was given over to people to print, and it was printed. And over there, it speaks about the idea of choosing life. Bacharta b'chaim. It says in Deuteronomy, Bacharta b'chaim. There's life and there's death. You should choose life. What's the significance of that? Isn't that an obvious thing to choose life? And the Alter Rebbe and the Mittel Rebbe explain is what the commandment is, that in everything in the world there's the temporary, which is death, because it's not going to last forever and it's eventually going to die. It's going to be temporary. That's death. And then there's the everlasting, which is the divine spark inside it that's powering it. That's going to be forever. That's why it's life. Life, something's living, something that's true, something's going to continue and endure forever. So whatever, everything you experience in the world, where's your focus? Is your focus on the thing that's going to be temporary, which is the death of that object, or is your focus on something that's going to be the everlastingness of that object, which is the divinity behind that object, or the emotions, God's divine emotions behind that object? Is that what you're focusing on? So we're learning now the interface between the higher unity, which we learned how the God's emotions, the way they are in the world of Atzilus, and the way his personality, they're absolutely a expression of his essence. They're totally united with his essence. They don't add anything to his essence, just an expression of God's essence. We're learning about the high unity. Now we need to connect it to the lower unity and realize we're like doing the interface, how Jacob connects to Rachel, and Yisrael connects to Yisrael mode connects to Leah. We're discussing this interface. And what's very important about this interface is that God's thought, speech, and action. So Leah represents God's thoughts. Rachel represents God's speech. The words flow, and each word for itself is temporary, right? It's temporary unless God chooses to continue saying that word. But by people, we see that words are temporary and they keep on changing. So what do we need to connect to? The temporary word or the divine emotion which powering that word? Because the life of that word is the divine emotion that's powering that word. So that is the idea of choosing life. Everything in the world we choose, we can choose just the temporary taste of of a food, or we can realize, well, there's a divine spark which is now given to me, giving me the opportunity to thank God, and that's something everlasting. The idea of gratitude, the emotion of thanking God, that's an everlasting thing, because that's an emotion of God. That's the divine spark. So let me connect to that. Let me put my focus on the right thing. And of course, we've learned a lot about education, and we've also learned about global politics. So this is uh, the emotion of compassion and das, having the right focus. It's about managing yourself, realizing your weaknesses are, and how you could take care of those weaknesses by staying more aware, how to deal with other people, and also on a global way, how countries and different types of cultures can deal with each other by recognizing their differences. And in all of them, our focus needs to be on the divine emotions which are powering everything, and to connect to that, because those are enduring, because everything else is transient, and transient is death, and we don't want to connect to that. We want to connect to Chaim. We want to Bacharta B'Chaim. We want to choose life.
Oh, man. And how would you title this class, Rabbi Chirik? You could think about it and send me a message later if you want.
Yeah.
Sounds like great, beautiful. It's so I send me that I haven't seen that Miami. I'd love to see it. It relates to what we were teaching on Sunday morning with the class on Rabbi Steif Sefer, that the whole concept of living things are striving for eternity. And that's exactly the point you're bringing out, that the Torah is reminding us to keep focused on that. That's where life is. Life is in the eternal, and what leads to the eternal.
Right, and he also mentions another thing is that if we just love God, so our soul also loved God before we were born. So what have we achieved? So he says specifically we need to love God beyond the limits of our heart, which is b'chol meidecha, with all our might.
Wow.
And then when we love God with all our might, that's when we've achieved something much greater, and the purpose of our life.
Beautiful. Okay. So maybe we'll learn that mimer next.
We have any questions?
I do. We have a question down here. I see how do we determine what the spark is in something?
Well, if God chooses that, there's a few things. First, we can look into the Torah. Where is this thing in the Torah? Where is this mentioned in the Torah? What's the guidance in the verses on this idea? Then we need to look into Torah law. What does the Torah law say about this? And then I would look into a Hasidic encyclopedia to understand what are the divine spheres that come into play to bring this to life. So when I align all these things, what do the verses say? What does the law say? And what does the Kabbalah say? If I look it up in an encyclopedia, then I know what the intent is and why God chose this thing and what the spark is all about in this idea. So it takes some research. That's the answer.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi Chirik.